All right, we're going to try something a little bit different here. This is going to be like a longer video, but of short reviews. And a lot of my contemporaries do something like this. Crash Thompson does Fimmies. I know Mark from Spectrum Pulse does On the Pulse. I usually do like the little quarter notes where it's just 4 records, but I have a lot of records. You know, there was a plethora of albums that were released this past year, and I was kind of saving up and saving up and saving up, but I felt the weight so crippling of these albums, and it got to the point where I was so like wrapped up in the need to get an album review out, but not having enough to say, that it was hindering my ability to even listen to music and get those things out. So I figure if I clear the slate, it'll help me really get into some of those records that I really want to talk about, and that will be coming out, you know, as the weeks progress. But yeah, by the end of July, beginning of August, I just felt done because of all the releases that were coming out. And I wanted to give these albums the time of day and showcase them, but again, I didn't have enough to say. So instead of doing like 4 or 5 of these quarter notes, I'm just going to bang them off all at once. We'll see if anybody wants to listen to them. Now, most of these aren't progressive rock. There are a few that are definitely more progressive rock than others, but a lot of them are more popular releases, you know, from really, really big bands like Metallica and Carly Rae Jepsen and Lana Del Rey. But I've sneaked in, you know, some of those prog records, because most of the time I have more to say about prog records, so that's why I do a full-length album review. But yeah, maybe you'll find something in this batch that you'll want to check out, because that's kind of my hope for this video is, you know, come for an album that you want to hear my opinion on, but stay for those albums that you didn't even know existed, from bands that you didn't even know exist. I've also been listening to a lot of really, really heavy metal stuff, so there's going to be quite a few metal albums on here as well. So yeah, enjoy that. Now, I've arranged this not chronologically based on release date. I've actually gone through it and I've alphabetized it by artist or band. So we're going to get through these. We're going to start with the A's. So let's start this all off with The Coral Tombs by Ahab. So Ahab is a new record from me, and I want to shout out Beaver Mosh, good old Maddie. She has introduced me to a lot of really great metal works. She has a new channel out. I highly recommend checking her out. We have a tier list coming up in the near future, or I've already released it, depending on how this all works out. And she introduced me to Ahab, which is a really great doom sludge metal kind of a band. Each one of their albums are like nautical themed in one way, shape, or form. And this one, The Coral Tombs, is a concept album on one of my favorite books of all time, which is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It's great. It's got this big menacing powerhouse to it. I've returned to this one quite a bit. Maybe not as much as I would like to, just because of how much music there is out there at the moment, but I was having a lot of fun with this record. If you're into that kind of droney, doom kind of metal, but with a little bit more teeth and a little bit more direction, I highly recommend checking this one out. Ava Max is up next with Diamonds and Dance Floors. I really loved her, first album of Heaven and Hell. Really loved that one. I came back to it. I loved a lot of the singles from that one, Sweet But Psycho and what is it? Something About Me or something like that. It's kind of that bubblegum pop that I really love listening to for like a couple of weeks, and then I just never listened to it again. I liked it to such an extent I actually have it in my collection, and so I was really excited for Diamonds and Dance Floors, and I was really disappointed with this one. It didn't have that kind of sweet bubblegum pop, really pump up the jam that I was really hoping for. It didn't have that really catchy hooks on there, and a lot of people were saying that it was rip-offs of a lot of the pop music that we've been getting from the 2010s and into the 2020s. And I can't argue with that, but I also have a little bit of a sticking point because that's most of pop music ever. Like most of pop music is just rehashing of whatever's currently trending. So I can at least give Ava a little bit of a pass because everybody does that. But it is a little bit more glowingly obvious on this one. I don't feel as though it's as original as her first record. And I also feel like she's kind of doubling down on some of the things that she was doing in that first record. I'm just not really here for it. I think I spun this a lot when it first dropped back in February, but after that, I haven't really picked this one up. Whereas at least with Heaven and Hell, I spun it a couple times since February. So Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at for this one. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't check it out unless you're a diehard Ava fan, and at this point, you probably already have. So, yeah, let's move on. Black Braid 2 by Black Braid. So Black Braid is another kind of tech death metal band, and this is one of those like that falls in the same category where I'm going to be talking a lot about certain albums that came out this year that really it's almost indistinguishable which albums are from which band. Now, this is the follow-up to their self-titled debut album of Black Braid, and I mean, it's good music. It's just a little bit on the long side at an hour and 6 minutes long. It's got that aggression, it's got that oomph about it, but there really wasn't anything on here that made it stood out from the rest. You know, like there's been a number of really, really, really good, you know, tech progressive death metal albums out there, and because there's so much of it, you know, I'm looking for that really special spice. You know, I'm looking for something that puts them above the rest, you know, something that does, you know, something different. And it's really hard, you know, because these guys are playing really incredibly well. You know, they've got the talent, the songwriting ship is there, everything sounds incredible, but with just so much out there, they kind of bled into everything else. So, like, even though this album, you know, is kind of got the centerpiece of 2 tracks that are well within, like, you know, past the 10-minute mark of Moss-Covered Bones on the Altar of the blah blah, on the Altar of the Moon, and then A Song of Death on Winds of Dawn. Both of these great tech prog songs. But again, it didn't really capture enough for me to come back to it as much as some of the other ones. So, great record. I do actually recommend this one if you're into this kind of really tech death prog. But if you're not, it's not going to convert you either. So, yeah, that's what I've got for this one. Blood Ceremony's new album, The Old Ways Remain. I've been really craving albums like this. You know, Blood Ceremony is kind of in the same veins as Person, kind of that really trippy acid rock, acid metal stuff from like the late 60s, early 70s. You know, kind of in the same vein as like a Black Sabbath. But, you know, it's more rock metal than like straight up metal. And I really love it. This one had a lot of really fun twists and turns. I kept finding myself, you know, in my witchy hippie mood whenever I wanted to listen to something like this, and it was fun. You know, it got me back into this kind of music, and you know, I get maybe like 2 or 3 of these types of albums a year, and this one was very good and very enjoyable. If you're a fan of this kind of hippie rock, this really like almost witchy rock in that sense, I think you're really going to have a fun time with this one. But yeah, if you're looking for anything new, you're not necessarily going to find it on this one. So yeah, I recommend it. I think it's a good time. I think you guys should check this one out. Now we're getting into some good stuff. Some Cattle Decapitation with their album of Terracite. Yeah, this one is heavy. You know, this one I know is making a lot of waves when it was first coming out. A lot of people were enjoying, you know, a return to form for Cattle Decapitation. You know, some really good, that really meaty, thrashy death metal. For me, you know what you're getting the moment you listen to the first track on this one. The album doesn't really change or deviate too much from that. You know, you get exactly what you want for the rest of the album. And yeah, it's fine. It's fine. But for anybody that's looking for, you know, a little bit more, you're not necessarily going to find that. I can't fault it because it succeeds at doing exactly what it wants to do, but it doesn't do anything else. So if you're looking for just some good old-fashioned, thrashy death metal, you're going to be very satisfied with this one. If you're looking for like the next big sound, if you're looking for some experimentation, not necessarily going to find it, but whatever is found on here, I think you're going to enjoy. So yeah, this is another one that I think you'll enjoy if you really want some good stuff. News from the invisible world from The Fierce and the Dead. This is a new one for me. I recommended it to Rhyme Signatures because, again, it's got a circle on the main title there. This one is fun. You know, it's kind of in the same vein as a lot of the modern prog stuff that we would get from like a Deer Hunter or Coheed and Cambria. This one is, It's interesting because like after the first 2 or 3 tracks on this album, I just found myself not all that interested to it. Like the start and the shake the jar, those 2 songs, really really good stuff. I really love what they were doing with this with some of the songs on here, the sounds, the songs, really really good times. But I just felt like they ran out of steam, and the rest of the album for me kind of landed a little bit flat. I would recommend listening to those first 2 tracks, and then after that, you can kind of put it to the wayside. I wasn't as much of a fan of the rest of the album, but it was still really good music, and if you're a fan of this style of rock, you know, with rock with a little bit of the prog kind of feels and like tinges on there, I think you're really going to enjoy it. So yeah, but for me, because again, there was so much new music out that I couldn't feel like I could really give it its good dues. Yeah, I just kind of moved on once the rest of the album finished, and I'm like, okay, there wasn't a whole lot of extra, you know, spice on there. So yeah, I would still recommend checking out those first couple of tracks though. Those were really, really meaty and really, really fun. Echoes of Journeys Past by Flight. Now, this one was a lot of fun. This one was kind of in the same vein as Blood Ceremony in terms of like this very trippy, very, hippie kind of music. This is coming more into like the hard rock style instead of like the full-on metal stuff. I'm reminded of bands like the Church of the Crystal Skull is the easiest one to draw a comparison for. I'm getting flavors of like a Polyphonic Spree. Like these guys are really emulating that classic 70s rock that we got from bands like Boston, like we got from like early Rush, like Fly From Here and Caress the Steel, like that kind of like classic heavy rock. You know, it's a lot of fun. I think that these guys are doing what Greta Van Fleet are trying to do. Spoiler alert, I got Greta Van Fleet on here too. But I just feel as though these guys are doing something a little bit more original than what Greta Van Fleet is doing. So yeah, I had a great time. This is one that I've actually been coming back to, and I wanted to do a full-length album review, but what I just said applies to pretty much all of their songs, so I'd basically be repeating myself throughout the entire album review. So I highly recommend Flight, especially their Echoes of Journeys Past, and I think you'll have a good time with it. So yeah, go and check it out. But here we are from Foo Fighters. I enjoy Foo Fighters. I'm not like the ride or die Foo Fighters fan that a lot of people my age are. Now, that being said, I grew up with so much of their music, but I don't know. I was more into the prog scene. I was more into the classic rock stuff, and it was fine. So I've always kind of kept my finger on the pulse because every once in a while a Foo Fighters track will surprise me. Maybe not the full-on album, but there'll always be like 1 or 2 tracks on it that I'll really enjoy. Like the last song from the last album that they put out, I really enjoyed. I actually enjoyed all of Sonic Highways. I thought that was a lot of fun. And just, again, track here and there. So, but here we are, is kind of the band going through the grieving process of the loss of their drummer. And then the attempt at filling the shoes of the new drummer. And I felt like this was a great way of paying homage and honoring their fallen friend, you know, because it really was like a family. Like the Foo Fighters as a band are more of a family than anything else. And this was them really paying homage to the drummer as a new drummer is kind of inducted into the band. And it was good. It was one of the better albums that I've heard from Foo Fighters for a while. It didn't make me want to come back time and time again, but I was pleasantly surprised. Yeah, if you're into the Foo, if you've never heard Foo Fighters before, I mean, what are you doing? But this is a great starting point, especially if you've already devoured all their stuff from the 90s and the early 2000s. This is a great continuation of that. It doesn't sound all that different, you know, they're not blazing a new trail or anything, but it is good Foo Fighters songs. So, there you go. That's my thoughts of Foo Fighters. But here we are. Starcatcher from Greta Van Fleet. In my mind, it's their 4th album. Let me rephrase. It's their 4th full-length album, but I've heard a lot of people say that it's their 3rd. You know, I always kind of consider the first couple of albums from Greta Van Fleet as being full-length albums. The album that they put out a couple of years ago, Gardens to something or other, I really enjoy. And I'm one of the weird individuals that I actually enjoy Greta Van Fleet. I've really enjoyed all their albums. I've really liked to see their progression. Yes, they're leaning really heavily on their their influences of Led Zeppelin. You know, at some points I would say that they're a full-on Led Zeppelin clone band, but we had Led Zeppelin clone bands in the 70s. Like Rush started off as a clone band for Led Zeppelin. Their self-titled debut album was basically a ripoff of Led Zeppelin. So I didn't really mind it as much, and I really enjoyed hearing that. And it's really interesting because this is the first album of theirs where they're really starting to ease off on their influences and starting their own styles. And I'm not as big of a fan. I know a lot of people are like, yeah, they're starting to come into their own. They're starting to develop their own sound and, you know, deviating a little bit away from that. And even though I've been enjoying Starcatcher, I'm not as much of a fan of this album as I was for their first handful of records. This is the first album of theirs where I haven't run out and purchased on physical media, which is so interesting to me because it does have a lot of the more like original sounding tracks, but I don't know, it doesn't do a whole lot for me. So yeah, I was a little disappointed with this one. I was really excited to really dive in and really sink my teeth into it, but I just found myself a little disappointed. I listened to a lot of Greta Van Fleet in the summertime, and you know, we're starting to come to the little last bit of summer season before we go straight into the spooky season. So maybe I need to, you know, sit on the deck and listen to these guys for just a little bit longer. But that's my initial thoughts, and that's what I've been thinking about. I will say this, after listening to this album, what I will say is that there wasn't enough on this album after a handful of listens for me to immediately go back and listen to, but I think if I give this album, you know, its fair shake, maybe I'll get into it, but we've had so much music that was released this summer, I honestly can't I can't devote any more time to any of these albums if I don't immediately catch on to something. So that's where I'm at for Greta Van Fleet. I was kind of hoping for a little bit more and was ultimately disappointed. All right, we're coming into Lana Del Rey's album, Did You Know There's a Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard? This one was an early album of this year. I think it came out in like March or April. And I have been really digging this album. You know, this has been an album that I've been having on pretty clean rotation. I mean, at the end of the day, it's another solid Lana Del Rey record. You know, after her two records from, what was it, The Blue Banisters and Chemtrails Over the Country Club, I wasn't as excited about those 1-2 punches. You know, I felt like they were fine, but kind of derivative of themselves. There wasn't anything like unique about those records, especially after Lana's like standout performance from Norman fucking Rockwell. That really blew my socks off. Like that was really what got me into Lana at the forefront. And then I went back and I listened to Born to Die and Ultraviolence and Paradise and all those and just got wrapped up into it. So it's a really nice homecoming with this one. You know, I felt like this album holds a lot of the reasons why I fell in love with Lana in the forefront. You know, I just picture myself living my best femme life, you know, with like driving down a country road at like 11 p.m. in a convertible. You know, that kind of essence I really, really enjoy. And I felt like this album really captured that feeling. So yeah, if you haven't heard Lana before, I think this is a great entry point. There's a lot of really fun experimentations that she does, but it's classic Americana. So highly recommend and go check this one out. Metallica's album of 74 Seasons. Now this was a big one that was released. It's their longest album to date, which I think is kind of funny because it's a single disc, and their last album of Hardwired to Self-Destruct was a double disc. Yeah, this one is longer. It is some really good classic Metallica stuff. This summer, I have done a deep dive into Metallica's past work because outside of the Black Album, I really didn't listen to a lot of Metallica stuff growing up and even into my teenagehood. And now that I have a podcast specifically devoted to metal music, I'm like, I need to brush up on some of these classic metal acts. And so I've been listening to the first 4 records from Metallica, going into the Black Album. So I was primed for this record when it came out, and it was a blast. I was pleasantly surprised. It is way too long. They could have very easily, you know, shoved off maybe about 20 minutes worth of music and not really lost a whole lot. But each song really is like a powerhouse. Like each one is solid. So yeah, I wonder if they would have split this into two or made it a double disc. I wonder if that would have helped digest this album a little bit more, kind of like how Hardwired to Self-Destruct did. But yeah, in terms of like later day Metallica, like this is just as good, if not better, than Hardwired, than Death Magnetic. We are so far away from Saint Anger and Load and Reload. Yeah, this could, I don't want to say this could stand toe to toe with some of the classic albums, but this one does, you know, it's another breath of fresh air from Metallica that honestly I thought was going to run out of steam, but they really pleasantly surprised me with this one. So kudos. Individuation by Subterranean Disposition. Yeah, if you're looking for some more doom metal, if you're looking for like that death metal, you're going to find something really, really good here. I've been really loving this album. A lot of these tracks, especially if you're looking for those tracks that are much longer in length. We've got, what, five tracks on here. The shortest one is 7 minutes and 55 seconds. We've got a 10-minute track, a 9-minute track, a 10.5-minute track, and then 2 tracks that are almost touching the 8-minute mark. If you like that death metal that takes its time, you know, it's not just 1,000 notes per minute 100% of the time. There's a lot of buildups. There's a lot of climbs. There's a lot of like ground that's being covered. You know, it's really that marriage between drone kind of sludge metal and the clean death metal, you know, because it's not just sludgy 100% of the time, but it's not 1,000 minutes and, 1,000 notes a minute. Yeah, I had a blast with this one. It's got some really, really satisfying crescendos. It's got a really fun climb on a lot of these tracks. And this one does beg to be listened to multiple times. So I had a great time with this one. This one's like near the top of one of my favorite, more death metal records of this year, and I had a great time with this one. I highly recommend checking this one out. This is one of those few cases where even if you're not into the death metal, the growls, the screams, or the Cookie Monster voice, I would recommend giving it a test. You know, I would recommend checking it out because this might convert you. This was one of those rare instances where I think, you know what, maybe this will push it over the edge. Maybe this one will do it for you. So yeah, go and check this one out. I think it's a really good time. All right, this is the halfway point, and I'm seeing that raw footage were over 20 minutes. So yeah, I have a feeling this video is going to be a little bit on the long side. So bear with me as we go into Queens of the Stone Age, End Times New Roman. Queens of the Stone Age is another band that I never really got into in their heyday, and I know a lot of people my age really, really love Queens of the Stone Age. I mean, I heard Songs for the Deaf and a few other tracks here and there, and I've always been very interested to hear what they have to say because I always feel like each of the tracks from Queens of the Stone Age sounds so different from one another, especially when I was listening to Songs for the Deaf. And this one is just another Queens of the Stone Age record. You know, it's solid from start to finish. It is solid. I never felt myself getting bored. I never felt myself, you know, ready to turn it off or looking forward to listen to whatever is up next. You're not really going to get anything out of the ordinary. You're not going to get anything that blows down the doors or like really redefines them. They know what they want to do and they'll do it to their best. And End Times New Roman, it follows suit with the last handful of Queens of the Stone Age records where when I was listening to it, it was a good time. But it wasn't so good of a time that I felt like I needed to rush out and pick it up, you know? So it was fine. If you're a fan of Queens of the Stone Age, it's going to be a good time. If you're a fan of like that traditional rock music that I feel like we've kind of lost within the 2010s and now into the 2020s, I think you're really going to enjoy this one. So I recommend it. I think it's a good time, and that's what I've got for Queens of the Stone Age. Configurations by Ranx. So Ranx is a new band for me. This is another one of those like deep metal records that one of my friends has, Ian actually from Rhyme Signatures has suggested to me and says, you got to check this one out. And man, he wasn't wrong. This one is some meaty death metal, tech death metal, very genty in its presentation as well. You got a lot of those like drop beats that are a lot of fun. Man, this one, as I mentioned, it's meaty. There's a lot of really long stretches of music with, you know, quite a few songs going into 16 minutes. Like the last track is almost 17 minutes long, and it takes its time to really develop and really grow. So I've had a blast with this one. Lots of fun. Again, very dark, very menacing. If you're into that really heavy, really tech, very like aggressive death metal, you're going to have a lot of fun with this. But if you're the kind of person that's like, I don't like anything that's not like, if they're screaming or they're growling or they're like doing something other than just clean singing, this one might not necessarily be for you. I would say give this one a pass. But if you're interested at trying something a little bit new, I had a good time with this one, and it has a lot of really, really dark and really menacing to it that I think you'll really enjoy. So yeah, this one definitely gets the notes of approval, and I should have done a full-length album review for it, but didn't have a whole lot to say because it doesn't really waver and it doesn't change all that much. But I had a great time with it. I think you will too if you're into this style of music. But if you're not, this one's not necessarily going to convert you either. So yeah, go in for the musicianship and stay for the gnarly beats. That's what I've got to say about this one. Atta by Sigur Ross. Now, this was one of my biggest disappointed albums of the year. I've loved Sigur Ross. I've loved a lot of what they were doing lately with the meditation stuff, where it's very droney. It's very like ambient sounds. I fell in love with them back in like the early 2000s with I'm not even going to try to pronounce half of them, but I always figure, there's the Angel Fetus album, there's the Brackets album, and then Tack. Those three records just, classic post-rock and ambient experimental rock. But this is just kind of boring, I feel like they're spinning their wheels. They're not really doing anything all that interesting. They didn't have those big build-ups that I love. Like, that's what it is that I come into a Sigur Ross album for. Those big build-ups, those heavenly sounds. Like, I want to close my eyes and literally see the gates of heaven open up. The big rays of sunshine. And I'm not getting that here, and that was a really big letdown. I was really hoping for something else and something better, but what we got was definitely a disappointment, especially after waiting so long for a official studio record. Because, as I mentioned, we've got a lot of those meditative records, a lot of those ambient records that I've enjoyed. I really like them. Yeah, there's not a whole lot here for me to get back to. So, a little disappointed, really hoping for more, and I didn't get it. So, yeah, that's what I got for the new Sigur Ross album. Squids' new record of Oh Monolith. I love the fact that this album has been getting a lot of praise and recognition because I've been loving Squids since I first heard them a couple years ago. If you're into this kind of new avant-garde rock in the same vein as like Black Midi or Old Country New Road, Black Country New Road, I think you're really, really going to love this. They're coming more into their own. They're experimenting. It's very jazzy. It's very funky. And that's what I really, really love. Like, I love a good funk album, and this one's really itching that scratch for me. I love how quirky, how experimental they are. They're not afraid to do weird, and as somebody that loves good, weird music, this is definitely up that valley. So, yeah, this is one that I really, really enjoyed. I wanted to listen to it again and again and again because there was just so much music out there. I had to be like, okay, I really got to listen to these other albums because I have a little bit more of a formed thought about those. And for this, it's just fun, funky, fresh music. And if you're looking for something new, like as I've said in the past, like a lot of these records, they're fine, but they don't really add anything new. This adds new. This has that shiny new car smell is still on it when you're listening to it. And I really, really enjoyed it. So yeah, go and check it out. I think you're going to have a really good time with it. Okay, I had to talk about my girl, Taylor Swift. She put out Speak Now earlier this year, her version of it. She just announced that she's going to be putting out 1989, which I'm really, really looking forward to because that one was one of my favorite records from her. And yeah, it's good. I like the fact that Speak Now, Taylor's version, is a little bit more rocking. You can see the use of, the production side of things, since the original release of the record. So it's got a little bit more of a polish on a lot of these tracks. I mean, Speak Now was never necessarily my favorite, but I do have a soft spot in my heart for it. So yeah, it was fun. I love that Taylor's doing this. This one doesn't deviate too far away outside of, adding a little bit more electric guitars, having a little bit more of a rocking tinge on things. I've been enjoying it, and I have no problem listening to this one over her original one this time moving forward. You know, like, I've loved what she did with Red. I loved what she did with Fearless, but there was, you know, enough change to make those more unique albums. I feel like this one was just more of a polishing up, kind of giving it a quick scrub and then releasing. So yeah, great record. If you're a fan of Taylor, you've already listened to it, and if not, you can pass. You know, it's not gonna change your life or anything. Okay, coming into some really heavy stuff now with Thantafaxath, I think is how you pronounce it. Thantafanaxis. You think I would know how to pronounce these boys, being a Toronto band. Myself, hailing from Toronto. This is their Hivemind Narcosis. Hivemind Narcosis. I consider this the final, you know, entry within the 3-album trilogy of Victory Over the Sun, Dance You Monsters to My Soft Song, and Liturgies 93696. And this very aggressive, very experimental, very heavy, very like death metal, where it's just screaming, so harsh, so like and even though this might be the weaker of the 3, I still had a lot of fun with it. You know, they're really rejuvenizing this style of very, very aggressive death metal and black metal specifically that I've been loving it. You know, when I feel like listening to Victory Over the Sun for just one more time, but just a little bit different, I'll turn to this one because, yeah, I think these 3 records really are the 3 shining gems of the black metal, death metal core that we've had of this year. So highly recommend this one if you're into this. You know, if you've listened to all of Liturgy and you want something else, and you've already turned to Victory Over the Sun and want just something a little bit more spicy, yeah, give this one a try. I think you'll really enjoy that one. Let's move on to the last one. We're down to the final one. And of course, it has to be Voivod. They're Morgoth Tales. So anybody that doesn't know about Voivod, they are a Quebec, just punk metal band. Like, this was probably the strangest and most aggressive band to come out of the 80s. And yeah, I actually reviewed their No Face album, and I live streamed another one of their albums. And it was a really, really good time. You know, if you're looking for that aggressive, like, take off your face kind of, you know, the perfect blending of punk, aggressive thrash metal. Yeah, and these guys are like almost 50 years old, and they're still able to really just bang out those tasty, destructive, gnarly riffs. So if you're looking for something really aggressive, if you're looking for something really juicy, these guys still deliver, you know, which is something that I'm shocked about at this point in their career. So yeah, if you're looking for that aggressive kind of styles, this album's for you. This one does come with a massive warning, though, because if you're not into that kind of stuff, if you don't like aggressive music, you don't like balls to the wall insanity, if you don't like thrash or punk or anything that challenges the listener, don't listen to this one, because this one definitely challenges. So yeah, for me, I ate it up. I loved it. It was a great time. You know, there's not a whole lot of variation on this album either. You know, once you listen to the first track, you're like, okay, I know exactly what this is going to sound like for the rest of the album moving forward, which is fine. But yeah, not a whole lot else to say about it. And that's the final album review. I did it. That's 20 album reviews in what? Over 40 minutes. Oh boy. Yeah, I hope you guys found something new on this list. I hope you guys found something that you want to check out. Now that these are finally out and I can finally breathe again, I think I can finally get into those albums that I've been kind of sleeping on and I want to talk about. So look out for those in the future. I really needed to get these out there. So there you go. There's my 20 album reviews in 40 minutes. I hope you guys, as I mentioned, found something that you wanted to listen to. I'm just starting to spin because I've been talking for over 40 minutes. But yeah, let me know what your favorite record of the bottom, like of the list was. What was your least favorite? What was your most surprising? Let me know all about that by commenting down below, because that's what I've got. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.